Sharif, our next story.
We go now to the Middle East, where Israel has deported more than 120 activists seized after a deadly raid in international waters on a humanitarian aid flotilla trying to break the Gaza blockade. The activists were taken to Jordan and released. Hundreds more, most of them Turkish, remain in custody. In the face of mounting world criticism, Israel said it will release the rest of the detainees within the next 2 days. This is Mark Regev, the spokesperson for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
We don't want to see foreign activists in an Israeli detention center, and so we've decided to speed up the process of deportation, and our hope is to have all these activists out of the country within 48 hours.
At least 9 people were killed when armed Israeli commandos using helicopters and dinghies stormed the 6-ship Gaza aid convoy early on Monday. The identities of the dead have not been released, but 4 of them are said to be from Turkey. Reuters reports one of them is Turkish activist Ali Aydar Bengi. Speaking in Ankara, his sister-in-law Azize Tekin blasted Israel for the raid.
Yani İsrail bütün dünya ona tepkili. Biz de aynı şekilde.
The whole world
Yani
denounced Israel.
Yine
So did
gösterdi.
Once again, they have shown their ugly sides to the world.
Öyle bir
I cannot even consider them as human beings.
Onları insan olarak değerlendirmiyorum şahsen.
The attack has sparked worldwide protest and condemnation. Turkey's prime minister said Israel should be punished for what he called a bloody massacre. The UN Security Council condemned actions that, quote, led to the deaths and called for an impartial investigation. At a news conference, White House Press Secretary Robert Gibbs said the U.S. fully supports the Security Council statement.
The Security Council deeply regrets the loss of life and injuries resulting from the use of force during the Israeli military operation in international waters against the convoy sailing to Gaza. The Council in this context condemns those acts which resulted in the loss of at least 10 civilians and many wounded and expresses its condolences to their families. The Security Council requests the immediate release of the ships as well as civilians held by Israel.
So that would seem to cover President Obama's personal feeling as well. Some of the allies are looking for a stronger statement from him directly.
Well, this is supported not just by the United States, but by the international community.
In light of what happened with the Gaza aid flotilla, is the president considering at least backing international calls to lift the blockade on the Gaza Strip by the Israeli forces?
Well, look, obviously, as we have said before, we are concerned about the humanitarian situation in Gaza and continue to work with the Israelis and international partners in order to improve those conditions. And as the UN Security Council statement says, obviously it's an untenable situation.
Our initial reaction to this flotilla massacre, deliberate massacre, an international crime, was pitiful. What do you mean you regret? When something should be so strongly condemned, and if any other nation in the world had done it, we would have been up in arms. Well, what is this sacrosanct, ironclad relationship where a country that deliberately kills people and boycotts, and we aid and abet the boycott?
Look, I think the initial reaction regretted the loss of life as we tried and still continue to try to gather the relevant. Nothing can bring them back, Helen. We know that for sure, because I think if you could, that wouldn't be up for debate. We believe that a credible and transparent investigation has to look into the facts, and as I said earlier, we're open to international participation in that investigation.
Why did you think of it so late?
Why did we think of?
Why didn't you initially condemn it?
Again, I think the statements that we released speak directly to that.
Robert Gibbs being questioned at the end there by veteran White House correspondent Helen Thomas. All the permanent members of the Security Council, except for the United States, have explicitly called for Israel's 3-year blockade of the Gaza Strip to be lifted. Meanwhile, the Egyptian government has temporarily eased the blockade and opened the border crossing between Egypt and Gaza. Despite Monday's deadly attack, another ship carrying aid has set sail for Gaza, intending to challenge the Israeli blockade. Organizers of the Freedom Flotilla said 5 of those on board are Irish, including Nobel Peace Prize laureate Mairead Maguire. Israel remains defiant and says it's ready to intercept the ship. The ship is called the Rachel Corrie, named after the American peace activist Rachel Corrie, who was crushed to death by an Israeli military bulldozer on March 16, 2003, as she was trying to protect the home of a Palestinian family from being demolished. Hanim Zouabi, an Israeli Arab member of the Israeli Knesset, the parliament, was on the lead ship, the Mavi Marmara, when it was attacked. She was supposed to be on the program today, but she has just gone into session in the Israeli parliament. So for more, we turn to Edward Peck. He's a former U.S. ambassador. He, too, was on the Gaza aid flotilla, and he's joining us from his home in Chevy Chase, Maryland. Welcome to Democracy Now!
I'm honored.
Can you talk about, Ambassador Peck, what happened? Where were you in this flotilla, and what took place? What was it, about 4 o'clock Monday morning?
4 o'clock in the morning, and we were on a small ship. I was not on the one that was so heavily damaged physically in terms of the people. We were on a small ship that had been come out of Athens, Greece. There were 54 of us on board, and our ship was small enough so that the Israeli commandos were able to step from their deck right onto ours. So the first thing we knew was the sound of footsteps, and my eyelids flicked open, and there they were, heavily armed. And I noticed the Israeli government keeps referring to the paint guns, but the paint guns were attached to the automatic weapons and the stun grenades and the pepper spray and the tasers and everything else that these guys carried. Paint guns are for fun. And it was all over in the inside of the ship where I was, but up on the upper deck where some people had been sitting and sleeping, they made an effort to peacefully prevent the Israelis from taking over the wheelhouse, and we had a number of people injured in that. Nothing critical of a critical nature, but we had people on crutches and people with bandages and people with their arms in slings, and the captain had his neck in a brace. And they were the first ones off the ship when they finally forced us off the ship in Ashdod.
Ambassador Peck, why did you go on this mission?
Well, that's a good question. You know, I have been an activist. I don't consider that to be anything but a word that informs people that I'm interested and aware. And I've made a number of trips to Israel and all the surrounding countries in the West Bank since I retired, explaining, talking, meeting people, taking groups of people over to meet and discuss. And I decided I would like to have a chance to participate in something tactile, something that you could see, you know, something rather than just plain words. And the Americans were added to this group, as you probably know, very late in the game. It was a European thing, and at the last minute they said, we need some Americans, and they contacted Paul and Janet and got the Free Palestine movement organized, and they invited me, and I said yes, because I thought it would be helpful and beneficial to Israel to let them receive the supplies, just the convoy of the boats that carried the equipment, to come in and help the people of Gaza. A humanitarian effort not directed against Israel, but intended to deal with the humanitarian situation that needed to be dealt with by people who could help from outside. Well, everything we brought was donated, as you may know. Everything the flotilla brought was donated by people who said, we got to help the folks in Gaza. They are suffering.
Ambassador Peck, we're going to break. When we come back, we're going to play an interview with the Deputy Ambassador to the United Nations from Israel, and we'd like to get your response. Ambassador Edward Peck on with us on the line from Chevy Chase, Maryland, where he's just returned home. He was one of the members of the 700-strong Freedom Flotilla bringing humanitarian aid to Gaza. This is Democracy Now! We'll be back in a minute.